Today, we have the wonderful pleasure of being joined by Caitlin McBride, CFRE and Senior Consultant at Further Together. Caitlin has over a decade of experience across large nonprofits in the UK and grassroots charities in Canada. She's known for building authentic, value driven donor relationships and developing sustainable systems that deepen the donor experience. She's a published writer with a postgraduate diploma in professional communications, and Caitlin also serves as the vice chair of the board at the New Westminster Family Place in British Columbia. So we are in for a treat, everyone. She comes with us with a wealth of knowledge. So feel free to grab your drinks, grab your coffee, your tea, your snack, your lunch, buckle in for this next 45, 50 minutes or so. And thank you for joining us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you, Caitlin.
Amazing. Thank you for that. You've definitely done your research. I think I was going to introduce myself and I'm like, I'll just skip that slide now. Okay, I am just going to share my screen. Bear with me 1 minute and you can confirm if I'm sharing the right thing. Everything is looking good. All good?
Looks great. Yes, looks great.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. And obviously, a big thanks to Bonterra for inviting me to be here. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Caitlin McBride, and this is Building Real Relationships with Funders. So I'm really hoping that this session is something that's going to take you from churning out those cold pitches that honestly probably don't really go anywhere to building real, sustainable, long-term relationships with funders who, not just give you good funding and sustainable funding, but actually align with your organization's values, because I think that's really important. So I am so grateful you took the time to be here today. I know this is such a crazy season. I think I did not consider what mid-November was going to look like when we were scheduling this with Ontario, but I'm just so grateful for you to take the time to be with me. So let's get started. Okay. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about over the next little while together. So, how you can actually get started on building some of these funder relationships, how to connect with someone, what to say when you do, and after you connect with them, how you assess alignment to decide if you're actually going to move forward to build a partnership before the ask. Because this takes time and it takes energy. So, it's good to assess whether or not this is a good fit for you. And how you keep the relationship going after you get a yes, because it doesn't just end with a yes and end with a check. Like, this is like keeping the relationship going and making sure this is sustainable funding for you. And how you can leave the door open for further opportunities, even if it is a no. And as Ashley mentioned, we'll have some time at the end for questions both from the Bonterra team and from you as well. And I want to clarify just a couple of quick things before I dive in. This is not fast cash. This is deep relationship work, and that takes time and energy and commitment. But it is a pathway to building long-lasting, sustainable, and aligned partnerships so you don't always feel like you're in a constantly revolving door of donors and donor acquisition. And then the other thing that I just wanted to mention, I think this is for building those deep partnerships. I don't think this is something that you need to do for like every single grant application or every single grant pitch. There are going to be those organizations or those funders who, fund lots of different organizations for smaller amounts, and that's okay. That'd be a different relationship. And this is for those big, deep partnerships or ones where you think there's real potential for future growth. So just want to clarify those two pieces there. Okay. I feel like this has already been covered, but I'll dive in again. So my name is Caitlin McBride. I'm a certified fundraising executive. I've been fundraising for over a decade. I started my fundraising career in Scotland, actually, and then moved back home to Canada, working in small grassroots charities and mid-sized charities, and worn so many hats throughout the years. I'm a grant writer, major gifts officer, database administrator, comms manager, you name it. And of course, none of these were like actual formal titles. These are just all the many hats that you pick up working in a nonprofit, just doing all of the things. So varied experience. And something I really believe is that fundraising is about relationships and dignity and community and not just about dollars. And that's something that I'm super passionate about. And I'm currently working as a senior consultant at Further Together Fundraising, also the co-host of a podcast called The Small Nonprofit, which I invite you to check out. And as Ashley mentioned, I also serve as vice chair of an organization called New West Family Place, which serves families in my community in New Westminster, beautiful British Columbia. Shout out if there are any fellow Canadians on the call. Mm, mm, there we go. And I just want to talk about further the work we do at Further Together. We are really about building those deep partnerships with bold, justice-driven nonprofits who want to raise more funds while prioritizing the needs and voices of their communities. And we do things like fractional fundraising, where we partner with you for 12 months, and really we're in there with you, doing everything to do with fundraising, from grant writing to stuffing envelopes to you name it. We also provide things like fundraising strategies to help grow your revenue over 12 months. And we do one-to-one coaching, speaking, and training for organizations as well. So if you're interested in learning anything more about the work we do, website's posted right there. We'll also have some QR codes at the end. You can check it out. And yeah, always happy to chat. Okay, before we get into it, well, let's dive in. And I want to pass this over to people on the call. And maybe Ashley, maybe I'll get you to maybe read out some of these for me if that's okay, so I'm not getting lost in the chat. I do that. But I'd love to know what you think. Like, why are we here today? Why do you think relationships matter when it comes to fundraising and asking for like funding? I mean, if you're looking at a funder website and the priorities seem aligned, like why are we spending all this time and energy getting to know them and building a relationship? Like what do you think is the why do you think this matters? See. I'll give you a minute to pop something in the chat.
Ooh, they're flowing in. I see the
Ooh, good
first one,
stuff.
trust and confidence,
I love
because
that.
it's easier to retain than it is to acquire
Exactly.
new ones.
Yeah.
Impact, because they likely have many people approaching them. So you want to build that deep relationship,
Mhm.
like to work with people that you know, trust. All great answers. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. I also I'm just looking in the chat and like I'm seeing some names I recognize. Hi, Amy.
Oh, lovely.
Good. Amazing. Oh, these are such good answers. They can be inspired to your mission. Nothing beats in-person conversation. So true. So true. I love that. Oh my goodness. Okay. So good. Okay, all of these are amazing. I love this so much. And yes, I have a lot of these here. So we have one of them is obviously you do have a greater chance of funding success when you build a relationship. I remember I shared a study on my LinkedIn recently, and it was from a grant writing firm, and they had studied over the course of 2 years, and they showed that with cold applications, the success rate was only 7%. So this is like a professional grant writing firm. Like these applications were well crafted and well done. But if it was a cold application and there was no relationship built before that, their success rate was 7%. Not 17, not 70, 7. So you do have a better chance of funding success if you're building a relationship. But that's not the only thing. As we put in the chat and everything, it is about building a relationship and building a long-term partnership. Like if I ever get funding, we don't want it to be a one-time thing, right? I'm not that kind of girl. I want a marriage. I don't want a one-time thing. This is like a long-time relationship. And then, it's also about finding those people in the organizations who align with your values. Accepting money from a funder is inviting them into partnership. You're inviting them into the work that you do, and you're allowing them to align with your brand and your mission. You're allowing them to tell people that they fund you. And it's okay to be picky about that and to protect your brand and protect your mission and make sure that the people who are partnering with you on it believe in it as deeply as you do. We come in with a scarcity mindset, I think, with a lot of this. And I just wanted to share that it's okay to be picky. I've turned down funding before, funding that we needed, but it was not the right fit. And I am very proud of that, and I don't regret it at all. So what we're going to talk about today is, yeah, having a clear framework for those funder conversations, strategies to assess alignment, and ways to build lasting opportunities regardless of the outcome. And I've got some freebies for you. So I built a funding fit checklist assessment. So a framework to check whether the funder aligns with your organization, and then email templates for requesting feedback after rejection. God, this can be one of the hardest things to do, and I know there's such like paralysis afterwards as well if you get a rejection. Like it feels bad. I've been doing this for 13 years. When I get a rejection, it still feels bad. So I wanted to kind of craft some of these things to just help you have something that you can build off of, copy and paste and personalize. And yeah, we've got a few different scenarios that you can send the emails in. So we'll put the links to download that, I think, in the chat towards the end at the session and in the follow-up email. So you'll have those. Okay. So this is a big mindset shift. Coming to this realization for me completely changed fundraising. So let's get ready. Okay. Fundraising is not about pitching. Too often I hear organizations focus on the pitch. They've got to have something smooth, they got to have something snappy, they got to convince people. And I really want you to think less about the pitch and more about the partnership. Pitching is such like sales language, and fundraising is not sales. Fundraising is matchmaking. My job is not to pitch, it's not to convince people. My job is to find the people who want to make a difference in the world and match them with the organizations and programs who are making that difference and making that change happen. And I just want to say that again because this, yeah, that phrase really changed everything for me. You're not pitching people, you're not convincing them, you're matching people who want to make a difference in the world with the organizations that are making that difference and the programs maybe within your organization that are making that difference. And I just want to share how, for me, listening and finding the right fit for both my organization and funder you're talking to can make all the difference. And I one time was at an organization, and this is before I started with the organization. They had found a funder, looked on their website, looked like a good fit, whatever. So they sent in a cold pitch, cold proposal based off the information the funder had on their website. Obviously, it takes a little while for them to get back. So by the time I joined, I saw the rejection come through. I thought, okay, that's fine. Well, I still wanted to see, what had happened, see if we can like strengthen our proposal next time, or see if this is something that I should just cut from the list, and that's okay too. So I asked for a call for feedback, and then when I got on the call, I asked for feedback on the proposal, but I also asked them to talk about the priorities so I could really deepen my understanding of what they wanted to do and the things they wanted to fund. And while I was on the call, I realized that the application that we had sent them it was for the completely wrong program. It wasn't up their alley. Totally understand why we were rejected. And there was another program that we had that on the call, I thought, actually, this seems like a really good fit. So I told them about it briefly. And I tell you, like their eyes just lit up, but not only lit up, like I could see them welling up. I could see how much like this meant to them and how much they wanted to be part of what we were doing and the difference that we were making. I was like, this is a good partner. This is someone who really gets it, really understands. So, by the end of the call, they asked me to apply again. So not me asking, they asked me to apply again when it came up, and I was like, okay, well, this is a more expensive program. Can I increase my ask? Like, can we apply for $10,000 originally? Can I apply for 20? And I'll never forget, they were like, you need to ask for a lot more money than that, which was amazing. Like I had never up until that point had a funder ask me to ask them for more money. But I think that just really shows like how I was able to listen to them, really align the program, like what they wanted to do with the program that we were offering and how it was such a good match. And this has continued to be a good relationship for this organization and continue to be strong and support this program. So I'm really, really proud of this one. But I do want to also clarify that like this is a story that I share. This process also took 2 years. So from the original application to then having to wait, like build that relationship and wait for it to come around again, and then wait for that application to come through. So as I said, this is not fast cash. This is deep funder relationships, but this is a deep funder relationship that was worth it and worth the time and the energy, and it's made a big difference to this organization. Okay, how do you even get started on building these relationships? So I want to give you some tangible steps for building a relationship before you make an ask. And I want to clarify here that this is assuming you've already done some prospect research and identified funders that feel like a fit. I think we're Ashley and I are maybe going to talk a bit more about the prospect research stage at the end. Okay, but first step, find the right person. There are people behind grants. We need to talk to humans. This is not the time to email the info at inbox, which I can guarantee you is pretty likely to get ignored or you're not going to get the right person. I will allow you to email the info at inbox if you go through all of these steps and you still can't find someone to talk to, but only then. And the best place to start for this is really with warm leads. I often, if I find an organization or a funder that I think is a really good fit for an organization, the first place I'll go to try to get warm leads is the board. I will put it out there and share who the funder is, company foundation maybe, and ask, hey, does anybody know anybody who is connected to here where I can get a warm introduction? Even if it's a few steps removed, even if it's your board members, ex-bosses, neighbors, friend, if there can be any kind of introduction, I want it. That is your most likely opportunity to get in front of someone. Next up would be looking on the website for staff listings. Sometimes these aren't listed, but it's worth a try. Maybe you'll get lucky. And another resource can be searching and connecting on LinkedIn. And you're looking for people who are things like your social impact team, like corporate social responsibility, um, like marketing community initiatives. Those are kind of job titles and people who are the right ones that you want to talk to. The people who are working in the foundation side of things. If you're, let's say you're trying to connect with a company, is the ones who are working for the company foundation if they have one. Or yeah, CSR, community initiatives. And it's really important to be patient with this. This is definitely the thing that takes the longest, but it's so important to try to connect with the right person. I think I just spent 3 months trying to find a connection for my clients for a funder that looks really, really aligned, but I did, and we have a meeting next week, so it was worth it. And yeah, it's really important to note that some funders will not take these pre-application meetings, and I'll talk a bit about what you can do in that case, but that is something that, yeah, we do need to respect that. All right, you've got a contact. Amazing. Made it through the first step. Now you have to reach out to them. What do you put in the introduction email? This needs to be short and sweet. This is not where you're making your pitch. The goal of this email is to set up a call. You need to be having a face-to-face interaction. So your email is going to be one sentence about who you are and what your organization does, one sentence about why you think there might be alignment with their priorities. That's demonstrating that you've done your homework. You know, you're not just doing this as a scattergun approach, you're being strategic. And a direct ask, which is, can we set up a 20-minute call so I can learn about your funding priorities and whether our work would be a fit? I always do 20 minutes. 20 minutes feels like, I got 20 minutes. Like that doesn't feel like a huge amount of time. And you can get what you need in 20 minutes. You don't need longer than that. And so why aren't we pitching our proposal in the email? So in an email, you can only pitch one thing. You can only say, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? But in a conversation, you can learn what they're looking for and you can pivot based on that. So similarly to my conversation with that funder, you know, if I had just gone in and said, okay, you don't like this program, what about this one? I still could have gotten it completely wrong. But because I was on the call with them, as they were talking, my head was going and running through all of our programs and finding, okay, this is actually the one that feels like the biggest fit. So yes, so the end goal of this email is to have a call. All right, you did it. You got that. You got it on the books. This is a process that I'm going through right now with my client and my call with the funder next week. So doing research on their priorities, taking a look at who they fund in the past and try to pull out some of these patterns, understanding as much as you can about them before you get on the call, and coming prepared not just with the program that you had in mind for funding, but maybe 2 to 3 other programs that might be a fit. So obviously keeping the first one as the priority, but as I said, things might change on the call. So you have to kind of be ready to shift if needed. And when you're on the call, this is really important. Let them speak first. Don't start with your pitch. Don't dive in. Don't start talking about your programs right away. You want to hear what their priorities are and the way that they want to change the world in their words. You don't want to put anything into their head or skew them in any certain way. You want to hear authentically what they want to do and how they want to change the world. So you're going to ask for, you've done your research, so you know their funding priorities, but you want to ask for a deeper explanation of that. And if they have multiple pillars, maybe focusing on the one that you're best aligned with. And then after that, you can share about the work you do. And if it feels like there's a fit, you can maybe talk about like the program that you're thinking about pitching and then inviting feedback and yeah, just letting that conversation flow naturally. Like you're not there to close. You're there to have a conversation. And if there isn't a fit, which I've totally had, that's fine. Thank them for their time. It was a really good connection. It's still worthwhile. It's still valuable to make that connection. And I'll share super briefly because I think we've got a minute. But I did have one of these calls with somebody, and this was in like late 2019, and we realized on the call that this wasn't going to be a fit, and that's okay. Thank them for their time. And then obviously 2020 happened. I got a call from them completely out of the blue in April 2020, and they shared that they had gone through their process, they had allocated funding, but because of COVID, the programs that they had funded weren't actually running. So they were in a position where they had all this money and didn't really have anything to do with it. But because we had had a conversation, we had made that connection. They were like, "Would you like this money?" No, and I said, "Yes, please." So it is, you never know. Things might change. Hopefully that is not going to be any kind of a repeat, but um, things can change, funder priorities change. It's still worthwhile to have that connection. Okay, big question. I know you have been thinking this. This is great, lovely. But what if they won't meet with me? And yeah, there are plenty of funders who will say no to this, or they don't have time, or they're not available to meet, and that's okay. And we have to respect that. So there are some other things that you can do to get the information you need to assess if you're going to move forward with an application, because you're putting your time and energy into it. So you need to make sure that it's worth it. So here's where you get to do some investigative work, which is some of my favorite things to do. Um, so one of the best ways that I really find to understand a donor is to look at who they're funding. So if you're in Canada, see, I think I recognize some Canadian names on there. There is a easy way to look this up on the CRA Charities Directorate. So if you search for their name, you pull up their latest return, T3 something, whatever, and then there is a link that shows the amount of that they've given to registered charities. If you click on that, it will give you a list of everyone that they funded. There's also another tool, maybe I'll share it, maybe we can share it afterwards, which is the Investigative Journalism Foundation, which has an actual like searchable database for this information. US entities, I find is a little bit more challenging to get this information, but you can still do it. Doing the tax exempt organization search and diving into their 990, you can see who they funded and how much they funded for, so you can pull out some patterns there. You can also use AI to find mentions on the internet of your funder, see if the organizations have celebrated their gift, and then you can kind of pull out, okay, this is their trends and priorities. I like using ChatGPT deep research mode for this, which can be really powerful. And also attending their webinars, checking application guides, whatever you need to do to get the information you need. Okay, you've had a call, you've done your research. Now it's time for you to do some thinking. Just because somebody has deep pockets does not mean they will be a good funder. We need to stop and assess if this is a fit. And the freebie I developed goes way deeper into this, but this is just a kind of highlight for you. So this is, do their values align with ours? Are they excited about what excites us? As I said, when I was on the call with that funder, I could see them welling up. I could see how emotionally they were to our work. And that's how I knew that they were going to be a good partner. And also, what do they need in a partnership? And can we give it? If you're a small organization and this funder needs bi-weekly reporting and intense data analytics, you might not be able to deliver that. So these are things that we need to realistically think about and not just get dazzled by the number of zeros that are at the end of a potential grant. Okay, so you've kind of done a deep think, done some assessments. And now we're going to decide what we're going to do. If you're going to apply, keep building the relationship before you even apply. So send them updates about your program, invite them to community events. I also like to ask a couple of questions when I'm drafting the application, sometimes even if I know the answers. But, also just to kind of get verification and make sure that I'm on the right path, I'll maybe just say like, hey, I'm just on this question and, just wanted to get some clarification on this. And that I think keeps that connection going. And then, yeah, also reminds them that like you're here, you're applying. I'll also usually send an email after I apply, just saying, hey, just confirming, sending the application. Really grateful for all the time you spent with us. And yeah, let us know if you need more information. And I'll send that to the contact that I had a call with. And if you're not going to apply, don't just ghost them. Nobody likes being ghosted. Send them an email, let them know, appreciate their time. And yeah, I said that leaves the door open for future prospects, as or future changes, as I just demonstrated with that story of saying, hey, this isn't a fit to a funder. And then they came back around and when something wild happened and yeah, they remembered us. Okay. So this is where we need to press pause. We have to make sure that through this process that we are documenting everything we're doing on a CRM. And this is not busy work. This is critical institutional memory. By going through this process, you're collecting key information that's going to benefit your organization in the long term. And the decisions you make about what you don't go for are just as critical to your institutional memory as the funding that you do go for. And recording these is going to help people in the future not have to go through the same process over again. And you might be thinking, well, that's fine. I'm going to be around forever. I'm going to retire at this organization. Life happens, things happen. It was one of my colleagues used to say, like, you never know if you're going to get hit by a lottery ticket, which is, I think, a much nicer than the idea of getting hit by a bus. But you never know. Life happens, things change. And you need to make sure that this process is documented and that you're leaving good instructions and data for other people to pick up these relationships if you're not around. Okay. And I know we're kind of skipping over the proposal writing part in this, and I think that can be a whole other session. But we're gonna jump forward to, you've submitted your proposal, the results are in, you've been approved, amazing, celebrate, wonderful. Now is when the real relationship work starts. This is not the end, this is the beginning. You can't just thank them, send them an email, and then only talk to them the next time you have to give them a report or if you need money. It's about you have to keep sending them updates on how things are going, be honest about challenges, invite them to see your work if possible. I actually have a really good story about that if we have time at the end. But yeah, it's great to kind of invite them in to just deepen that relationship. And you don't just build this great relationship with the funder and then go cold. And especially going cold before you send them an application or another application for funding. So we need to start talking to them about reapplying at least 3 months before your grant period ends. And that is, to kind of re-warm up that relationship, but also to know about any changes in their process and funding priorities well in advance, because things might change and you have to be prepared for that. Okay, and then the gut punch email. We regret to inform you. This always stings. As I said, I've been doing this for 13 years. I got one of these this week. It still stings. And that's just how it is, unfortunately. But I think over the time that I've been doing this, I've realized that, rejection is not personal. Take a moment, but also understand that this is not about you. This is not about your organization. And a no can mean a not right now. This could have been more about capacity, about timing, or how you framed your work. This is an opportunity to get feedback, maybe to build more relationship and to strengthen your skills. Or this might not be your funder. This might not be the right fit. And that's also okay too. You're trying to find the right match. You're not trying to close. You're not trying to convince anyone. And I think learning from the unsuccessful applications is going to strengthen your fundraising just as much as the successful applications. So this is still, don't feel like you wasted your time. This is still valuable. All right, I'll do a quick recap. So here's my top tips. When you're trying to build these funder relationships, lead with curiosity and authenticity, not a sales pitch. And also alignment is everything. I think we come to these sort of relationships sometimes with a feeling of a power dynamic because we think that funders hold all the money, so they hold all the power. But you're assessing fit just as much as the funder. You're allowing them to partner with you on your work and serving your community. And you need to be selective about that and selective about who you invite in. Not everyone with a deep pocket is going to be a good partner in your work. And then finally, as I was just saying, a no is valuable. Does not mean you wasted your time. It could be the way onto their radar. I've had funders ask me to send in an application and tell me you're going to be rejected this round, but this puts you on our list. This could be a door to open opportunities in the future, or it could be a learning opportunity for your organization. Knowing who to take off the list and to not apply to is just as valuable as important as knowing who to apply to. Like, this is time that you're spending on these applications. If this is not ever going to be a win for you, don't spend that time. That's all right. And as I said before, and I keep repeating, this is a long game. This is not fast cash, but building these partnerships and these deep, sustainable partnerships are worth the time and investment to build sustainability for your organization. And love to give a bit of homework. I know it is a crazy season right now, but if you can, look at your funder list and try to reach out to one funder on that list and ask for a call. And maybe if you need to, scale that back a little bit, look at your funder list and start trying to find that right contact for a call. And then, maybe that might take a little while and you'll talk to them in January once everyone's over end of year madness. But yeah, that's your homework. And if you get stuck, this is literally what I do. So if you did want to connect with me, I do help leaders like you every day. We try to research and identify right funders for your mission, build relationship systems, craft proposals that reflect partnership. And we do this usually through our fractional fundraising partnerships. So you're not doing it alone. And, we try to be part of your team and give you real support from experienced fundraisers like me. And I got some links here. Yeah, these should all be scannable if you got your phone next to you. Would love to connect. I've got my LinkedIn there, the small nonprofit podcast that I co-host, which I mentioned. It's available on Spotify and other streaming things, I assume. I don't know. I just use Spotify. And then a link to our website as well if you want to check it out. Okay, I think we're heading into Q&A. I have a slide here, but I find these graphics very aggressive, so I might stop sharing my screen.
If you want, you can keep your QR codes up too for a while as
Oh,
well.
I should
Yeah.
do that. Okay, give me a second.
All
We can start
good.
with the Q&A, and I'll back up to that one.
Yes, awesome. Well, Caitlin, this was so great. Folks on the line, I'm sure you agree, and I told you all we were in for a treat. Such great nuggets of information. I think
Okay.
one of the favorite things that I love that you mentioned, and something that I didn't, personally really consider, is that have the importance of having a CRM or just some kind of note taking with your organization in terms of what grants you apply for and what you
Yeah.
don't apply for, and how just as important it is to know what you choose to not fund or apply for in this funding that you're choosing to skip out on. That information can
Mhm.
be just as valuable, and it's not something that I really
Yeah.
thought of, which
I
is
mean, it
very
takes
genius.
so long. It takes so long to craft those applications that, like,
Yeah,
if this is not your funder and not your person, and you know that, and you have that institutional knowledge, then you can spend that time doing other things that actually raise funds and serve your mission. So,
yeah,
yeah, it is. Every time if I get a no now, I'm like, okay, well, this is going to serve me next year because I can take this off of
right.
my list. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are so many things that you covered that I know folks want to kind of dig deeper in. I want to personally dig deeper in. And I would love to kind of transition to this conversation with you. I have some questions here laid out for you, and then we'll take questions, of course, from the folks joining us as well. But I wanted to talk about one of the biggest challenges that nonprofits talk about, which I think is, you know, very understandable. It's where to start. Where do you
Yeah.
actually find these funders? Where do you find
Mm.
out whether or not they even align with your mission and your values? And so I'd love to hear what you have to share with in terms of how should organizations go about identifying the right funders? And then really, how do they find the right people to contact within these organizations?
Yeah, and that is such a great question, and it is something that a question that I get a lot. I will have to say, and yeah, sorry if there's any representatives or anything on the call, those the very expensive like grant databases that are out there,
Mhm.
I personally don't find them very useful. I find the information can be quite outdated. And usually you see a funder and there's absolutely no information or way to like contact them or get in touch. So you're like, great, it's out there. What am I supposed to do with that information? So that's usually not the way that I go about it. I think one of the strongest ways to do prospect research is actually thinking about other organizations that are similar to you and seeing who funds them. And one of the ways you can do that research is by going on their website and seeing if they have like a funder list or like a recognition page. The other way, I think, as I mentioned, one of the best ways that I've found is using that in Canada, at least. Sorry, American friends, but there's the Investigative Journalism Foundation. They have that database, and if you type in the name of an organization, it will give you a funder list. I have really tried to find the same tool for Americans, and I cannot find it. So I'm sorry. If anybody knows of it that is out there, then I think yeah, please let me know. But yeah, finding those organizations that fund similar ones to you, and also just like getting out there and being out in the community. I find some of the best funding opportunities I found were flagged to me by other people who knew me and knew the work that I did and saw an application, saw a funding opportunity, and was like, this actually really aligns with what you do. And, similar to like finding a job, you kind of
Right.
being out there and putting yourself out there and telling people what you do and what your skills are. Often people will kind of share leads with you. So those are kind of some of the best ways that I've found to start doing that research. And yeah, and then also using there are great tools now with AI that ChatGPT's deep research mode can kind of give you a high level list. I find it similar to those like the grant databases in terms of you get a list, but then you kind of need to do your work after that as
Yeah.
well to find more information. So, but it is a yeah, finding those initial prospects. We could do a whole other session on that.
We
Yeah.
might need to. We
We
might
might
have
need
to have
to.
a part two.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I love what you said about making sure to be out in your community. And similar to like a job search, like you said, it's sometimes people know someone who knows someone who knows someone and can share with
Mhm.
you, oh,
Yeah.
they're funding organizations similar to yours. Check them out. I know this
Mhm.
person there, or so on and so forth. Super
Yeah.
important. And I know we all can relate to that in terms of not just funding, but like you said, jobs and just other connections that you want to make out in the world. So
Mhm.
very, very true. I would love to talk about what I think, we all are dreading, like you said, and you still experience it 10 plus years into your career. Let's talk about the moments that when a nonprofit gets that disappointing email that their grant was not
Mhm.
approved. What should they do next? Like, how do they keep that relationship alive? I think some folks might kind of
Mhm.
struggle with, you might take the no maybe a little personal or whatever the case may be, but you
Yeah.
still want to keep that relationship alive, assuming there might be future funding opportunities. So, how do organizations do that? And how do they not only keep it alive, but maybe even strengthen it for those future
Mhm.
opportunities?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great question. And I think, I always take a minute, like if I when I get that email, like it's still a gut punch. It's still disappointing. It's still, you were hoping to do a really cool project with this funding and now you can't do it. So yeah, take a minute, feel those feelings, be disappointed. It's okay. And then I think my next step is always asking for feedback. And as I've got those freebies for everyone, and I've got a bunch of different like templates that you can use based on kind of where you're at with the relationship. So sometimes I've got a template if it's like a completely cold relationship and you're trying to ask for feedback and everything in that, or if you've met with them and you want to ask like, okay, why did I still get rejected? So I think asking for feedback, if that is something that they offer, is basically the next step. And yes, there's lots of funders who are like, we don't get feedback, we're not going to respond to you. And I think then your next step is making that decision of like, okay, are we going to try again, or was this not worth our time? And unfortunately, if you don't get feedback, it's harder to make that decision. But also, if there's a very cold relationship, they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to give you feedback, then, it's maybe this isn't the right funder for you. Maybe,
Right.
I've got a grant that working with a client where they've been applying to the same funder for 2 years in a row and just got the rejected again. And we're at the point where we're like, you know what, maybe this isn't for us. You know?
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Right.
As I said, it's going to save a lot of time next year because we're going to apply our resources somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I think all of us can understand how much work goes into creating these applications. So want to make sure that you are spending your time in the best place and want to see, some fruit from that eventually. So
Exactly.
good point. Keeping on that subject though, what do they do, keeping on the subject, excuse me, of like what do they do after they receive a no? What can you share about what organizations should realistically expect after a grant is denied? I know this is a little tricky because
Mm.
every funder is different and they all have their own different processes and how they handle things. But yeah, any insight on what they can expect to happen after receiving that no? Anything you can share from your knowledge, your expertise?
Yeah, and that is a really hard question because every organization or funder is going to be different. So there's not really much that you can expect. They're going to react in different ways based on who they are. But I think if you're genuinely approaching this with curiosity, approaching with gratitude for them taking time to consider your application, and asking for, feedback so that you can strengthen your work and your mission and, how you talk about that. And you get, a reaction like that's very cold or you get ghosted. I think you can get information from that. You can get knowledge from that, and you can get knowledge about who they are as a funder and make that decision of whether or not you want to partner with them. It's like being ghosted in a relationship. It's like a guy ghosting you. Like that's not on you. That says about their character. So
Right.
yeah, but if it is like, I was just communicating with another funder and they said no to our application and, I connected with them and, they were very kind and very apologetic and they just said that they had restricted their geographic funding. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that's great information to know. And I was very happy with that interaction. Like they're still on my list in my head in case maybe we do something within that geography because I'm like, that was a really good, I was grateful to them for giving me that information. So,
Yeah.
whereas other ones where they're like, I don't know, they kind of have that same kind of like power dynamic thing
Right.
where I'm like, yeah, like we can be selective out of this. I think we need to get out of the scarcity principle mindset and realize like these are partners. Like we can be selective about who we partner with. And if they're not treating you with respect, then that's not for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Something else I wanted to touch on with you is I think oftentimes, nonprofits, they can pour so much energy into a funder, specifically one funder, and, pour
Yeah.
that energy into building that relationship so that, but unfortunately, sometimes that funder priorities might shift when a grant isn't
Mhm.
renewed or they, choose to stop working with an organization. And I think sometimes nonprofits can kind of feel like the rug has been pulled from under them. Something
Yeah.
that I'd love to touch on is, how can organizations think about strategically diversifying their funding while still maintaining that relationship with each funder? I think it can be kind of a tricky balancing act, but you don't want to only have one funder because yeah, things might change, things could always happen. So, yeah, how should they kind of go about that balancing act?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is important to, continue like having these deep relationships with partners, but also continue to continue to be doing some of this prospecting and reaching out to potential new partners and, making sure that you're not just focusing on relationships with only like your big partners too. Like your $10,000 donor is also a great partner and a great investor in your work, so we need to kind of keep those relationships alive as well so that because I've had it happen where yes we had a bigger partner change direction and everything, but we were able, because we had a really good relationship with a funder who was at like a lower level, we were able to go to them and be like, hey, this program that you really care about, like this is what's happened, are you able to increase your funding so that we can keep this going? And yeah, they definitely. agree to that because we had built that relationship and because we had that there. And, and this also goes back to what I was talking about in one of the slides of making sure that you're continuing to talk to this funder, to all your funders, by starting the conversation about applying again at least 3 months in advance, at least, so that if things have changed. They might have just had a board meeting and decided, actually, we're funding a completely different thing. We were funding hospitals, now we're funding ducks. Like, you need to kind of know when these changes are happening and be able to plan accordingly, not just find out when you submit your application.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think to your point, keeping that communication open so that you know where their priorities are, can kind of save you that time, right? Because imagine you
Yeah.
fill out this whole application, you create this proposal, and then, like you said, they're like, we're funding ducks now, no more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you don't want to waste your time. So, yeah, to your
Exactly.
point, keeping that communication open is super key. Awesome. Another question that I had from you, this is the last one that I have for you before we take some from the audience here, but when it comes to grant applications, I think a lot of nonprofits really wonder what they want to see, what funders really want to see. With your experience, is it all about the numbers? Is it all about the story? Where should nonprofits kind of lay and put their energy in terms of those two? What do funders really want to even see?
Yeah, yeah. And, I think for this, I want to share something that a funder shared with me. And I've never forgotten this statement, which is no stories without numbers and no numbers without stories. So, really, the answer to your question is both. Like, the stories are where you can really connect. The stories are really where you can understand the depth of the programs and the depth of the impact that the organization is making. And the numbers are where you can understand the scale. So
Yeah.
I really try to talk about, this one anecdote, like this, family who was in the hospital for months with their child, and, the cafeteria is a 40-minute walk away from the floor that she was on, and they couldn't get food. And, this program funds that food, or like food in the floor that they were being treated on, so that parents could actually like eat while they were with their child, and then be able to extrapolate that out. They were one of 500 families that we supported this year. So being able to kind of share both the impact and the depth of what you're doing, as well as the scale at which you're doing it.
I love that. No stories without numbers and no numbers without stories. I feel like that's a very easy and succinct way
Yeah,
to remember. Keep that in the
yeah.
back of your head as you're crafting your proposals.
Mhm.
I love that. Awesome. Okay. Wow. Well, that was my questions for you, Caitlin. Thank you so much for digging further into these. I know once I saw your presentation, I was like, oh, I have these further questions that I think we can definitely address here on the line. But I want to get folks, I want to get questions from the audience. Like I said, there are so many great ones rolling into the chat and the Q&A. So we're going to go ahead and transition to that. But before we do that, folks, I want to launch another quick poll here. If you are interested in learning more about Bonterra's tools and services, if you are looking for tools to kind of better manage your programs and the funds that your programs receive from those wonderful funders, I put up a quick poll here. Again, feel free to fill that out. And then once we wrap up today, I will have one of my colleagues give you a call and give you a chat, and initiate those conversations and see how we might be able to assist. But I'm going to go ahead and let folks kind of fill that out. But there was a question. I have to shift through them. There's quite a bit, but there was one that
Okay.
stood out. There was one that immediately stood out to me that I'd love to hear from you and your opinion on this is kind of how much follow up is too much follow up. I think folks are kind of interested in that sweet spot of like, you don't want to seem, I think we all have that fear of like seeming, pushy or annoying. So
Yeah.
how much is too much? When should you kind of call
Yeah.
it quits in terms of following up?
I guess I was wondering where, like, at what stage in the relationship we're
Good point.
talking about. Like, is
Good
this,
point.
too much follow up in terms of trying to get a meeting with somebody, or is it like after a grant? So I think, when I'm trying to connect with somebody, I have to say, maybe when I'm trying to connect with somebody, I'm a bit like a dog with a bone on that. Like, I do try really hard. Um, I'm not usually if I can I'm usually trying my hardest to get a warm connection. So the people who I'm annoying are actually my board members. And that's okay. I don't mind doing that. But once I kind of have that connection, yeah, I'll usually follow up like a few times to try to see if I can yeah, get something in the calendar. But usually if I have a warm connection, I haven't had to follow up very much because it's an intro. Like people are more likely to actually connect with me if I've been introduced by somebody else. So, yeah, just go after it if it's your board members or you're trying to get that connection. Like as I said, I get pretty intense with that, but I want to get in front of people. That's okay. I think afterwards, if you're trying to get feedback and it was a no, I'd maybe follow up like I usually kind of wrap it up after 3 times following up, and I kind of do like I think it's like after 1 week, and then after like 2 weeks after that, and then 3 weeks after that. So kind of like one, two, three.
Wow.
And then yeah, if that's the end of that relationship, then they've ghosted you. And then as I said, you can kind of take that into consideration of like, well, this is who the funder is, and maybe they're too busy, and like that's okay. But it's also yeah, like, are you gonna if they're not able to spend 20 minutes with you, are you going to next year spend a week crafting another amazing proposal?
Yeah.
You
Right.
know? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good
So I
call. Good
hope that
call.
answers the question in terms of like how much is too much. Yeah, I think it
Right.
depends based on what stage you're at. I think like when you're talking about follow up maybe after a yes, um, that is, yeah, I think I'm just trying to keep people informed and make sure people know, what's going on. You don't have to send them weekly digests of like what's happening in your program, but maybe if something really exciting happens, like if there's an opening or if there's like a milestone that you meet, like that's really fun to share. It can just be a quick thing of, I used to share with our funders, hey, we just hit 20,000 meals that we've delivered this year. Just wanted to share this with you. This is something you make possible. Thank you so much. Super quick. Love it. Like, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for answering that from all those different perspectives, or I should say stages in their
Mm.
relationship. I think that's super helpful. I wasn't sure where in their stage they had alluded to with that question, but you covered it all, which is great.
I hope that covers it. Yeah.
We have another question from Amy, which I love this question as well. Can you say more about how to respond to a rejection email? What kind of questions should you ask? What should you try to get from that funder in terms of maybe, a no or a why as to why their application wasn't approved? Yeah. What do they respond to them?
Yeah, yeah, and as I said, I've got some great templates that you can use and just kind of like copy and paste and everything from that because this can be one of the hardest things to write because it still kind of stings a little bit, It's hard to reach out sometimes, but I often try to ask for, as I said, like maybe more of a deeper understanding about their priorities, if there was anything specific that could have made our application stronger, yeah, or there are areas of our proposal that like maybe didn't quite align with yours. Again, I'm always trying to get a call. So like I think that my best outcome for feedback is like, yeah, another kind of like 20-minute call to talk about, the application and dive a little bit deeper. And then I think on that call you can, one, deepen the relationship even more. And then yeah, like dive into it and really kind of like understand, is this a fit? Is this not? Is this worth our time? And you can on a call, you can also flat out ask, hey, is it
Right.
worth it for us to apply again? And you could do that in email as well. It maybe just hits a little bit different. But yeah, I've definitely asked for just total honesty. Tell me the truth, hit me with it. And yeah, sometimes I've said, actually, no, we're changing our priorities. This isn't going to be a fit. As I said, that is still worth it. That is still worthwhile information and very valuable. So
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many questions, so many great questions in here. Folks on the line, apologies if we do not get to your question. I know we're kind of getting close to time here. We won't have time to go through them all, but they are some really great ones. A question that I see here from Elizabeth is, how do you build relationships with like not just one specific funder, but like groups of funders? So I'm thinking from more so of a perspective of like, yeah, this isn't just one family foundation or one person. Like, how do I get, a whole group of funders? How do I build that relationship?
Okay. I think maybe we would be getting more into like individual giving if that is the
Mm,
case.
mhm.
Like if that is, then that is maybe a different,
Yeah.
um, yeah, like a different strategy. And I actually did a webinar not too long ago about donor stewardship, which is more on, individual giving. So I would, maybe encourage folks to like check that out in terms of some manageable tips that people can use to build relationships with a larger like number of people and maybe people who aren't like associated with one group, but yeah, you're kind of like pool of individual donors.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's a very different tactic and very different kind of method of building those
Very true.
relationships there. And yeah, I think with these ones where you're trying to build those kind of like deep, long-lasting partnerships, it's very much more of a one-to-one strategy, whereas that would be more
Yeah.
of a what we call like a one-to-many strategy. So
Right.
things that you can do at a bigger scale. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that might be, as I said, a whole other webinar, which is like on our YouTube channel if you're wanting to check it out, or we can, yeah, always happy
Awesome.
to have a
Yeah.
discussion.
Perfect. And then I think we have time for one last one. And then this question comes from Shanice. Shanice asked, if the initial call turns out to not be a good fit at the time,
Mhm.
how much time should I wait before following up when a new opportunity arises with that organization?
Okay, so if I'm just talking this through, so like if you're on a call and it's not a good fit in that moment, but maybe the funder has like a new, like opens a new
Maybe a
funding
different,
stream.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you see that there's a possibility for a new like funding stream or like new priorities and everything, I would just don't as soon as you see that, like send them a quick message. Like you've built that relationship, like you've had that call. So you can be like, hey, I noticed that you just opened this up. I know that this wasn't quite a fit, but knowing what you know about our organization, is this something that we should be exploring? And I think because you've kind of built that relationship, they're probably more likely to respond and to answer you and to tell you honestly,
Yeah.
yes, maybe let's hop on the call, or like, yeah, I think that would be a great idea. You should definitely go for it. Yeah, I think that was the
Yeah.
question in terms of,
Yes, yes. Shanice
yeah,
clarified in
yeah,
the chat
okay,
that that's what she meant, which is
okay,
great.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Yay, okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, folks, we are just about at time. Caitlin, thank you so, so much for this session. Thank you so much for your insight and your time and all the tips and tricks and expertise you shared with folks on the line. I know some people had to jump a little earlier and were already saying thank you in the chat, which is always a good sign. It was such a pleasure. And for folks on the line, thank you. Thank you for taking an hour out of your time with us this afternoon. Thank you for an engaging chat and Q&A. It always makes for an awesome session. I really am sorry that we weren't able to get through all the questions. There was so many great ones, but we appreciate you all joining us. And don't forget to check out Caitlin's website, check out her LinkedIn, connect with her. And just as a reminder, we did record today's webinar, so we will be sending that out to your email as well with the checklist that I put into the chat as well.
Mm,
So be on the lookout for that. But again, thank you all so, so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time this afternoon. We hope you have a great rest of your day. We hope to see you at our next session. Bye,
mm.
everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.